When I was first getting into the Division 2 build crafting, and I was learning the new sets and brands and damage formulas, things like that, one thing I kept seeing over and over again from the community was that the Ninjabike backpack was bad. Somebody would post a build using the backpack. Without fail, somebody else in the comments would say, Ninjabike nerfs your build, take it off, you're losing damage. But here's the thing, they weren't completely wrong, but they also weren't completely right. And the nuance between the two things is exactly what this video is going to be about. Because the Ninjabike backpack is one of those pieces that I think the community formed an early opinion on, and that opinion is stuck. Even as the game evolved and there's new sets and brands that have come in to change the math a bit, the take stayed the same. Ninjabike nerfs your build, don't run it. But today we're going to look at the actual numbers, a few builds side by side, like the striker and core set variations, and I think that by the end of this you're going to see it's a lot more nuanced than people think. What's good everyone? Rognus here, welcome to my channel where I do the math so you don't have to. Deep dives on build theory, gear optimization, and the stuff that actually matters, because when you're built different, you hit different. Now let's get it going. Now before we get into the comparisons, let's establish what the Ninjabike backpack actually does. The resourceful talent counts as a +1 for every gear set and brand set you have equipped simultaneously. That means 3 striker pieces become 4 and 1 UA piece becomes 2, all at the same time. The trade-off is simple. You lose your backpack talent, and I would believe that's largely where this opinion came from, because the striker's Battlegear is the most popular meta DPS set in all of the Division 2, and its backpack is especially strong. Risk management gives you 0.90% weapon damage per stack instead of the 0.65 that it has at base. So at 100 stacks, the difference between 90% and 65% damage from stacking alone is pretty large and is actually incredibly hard to beat. But we're going to take a closer look. So here we effectively have 3 striker builds. They're all going to be running the equalizer chest with the obliterate. This is going to give us a fair comparison, and the only difference it's going to do is we're going to swap out the backpack and the gloves. So build 1, we're going to have your meta Overdog set, striker 4-piece with the risk management bag, and the Overdogs procced in these numbers. That means that we're hitting the lowest tier enemy in combat. Build 2 is going to be the same Overdogs build, the same setup, but this time Overdogs isn't hitting the right tier. So for whatever reason, we have the wrong enemy in the crosshair, so we're not going to get the proc from the Overdogs. Build 3 is going to be a ninja build. It's going to be 3 striker pieces, the ninja bag covering the 4-piece, as well as Fenrir's gloves. This is giving us the UA 2-piece and the Fenrir's 2-piece, both at the same time via the ninja. Now let's look at the weapon damage sources. For build 1, with Overdogs fully procced and striker stacks at max, with Obliterate adding 24%, here's something the community doesn't talk about enough. The Overdog's weakest link is actually amplified damage. It's not pooling additively with your weapon damage, it's sitting in its own separate multiplicative bracket and multiplying on top of everything else. So that 30% is actually worth more than if it was a flat 30% additive bonus. That's what makes them a top DPS choice as an exotic. So at full conditions, build 1 hits for 178% weapon damage. Build 2, remember, is the same build, same setup, but this time we're running the numbers if the Overdog isn't hitting the lowest tier enemy. Maybe there's a heavy in the room, maybe a shield, or maybe you're focused on the biggest threat, which doesn't happen to be the lowest tiered enemy at the time. So without that Overdog's proc, build 2 drops to only 114% weapon damage. Now build 3, with the ninja setup, our striker stacks drop down all the way to 65%. That's the real cost. Obliterate stays the same, but now we're going to get 20% AR damage from the UA 2-piece, as well as 10% AR damage from Fenris to try to make up some of that damage, as well as getting a 30% reload speed from Fenris 2-piece. The key difference is all these buffs are unconditional. Plus, we also receive a blue core from the ninja bag, which gives us an extra 170k armor. So unconditional weapon damage, build 1 and build 2 both sit at 114%. Build 3 sits at 119% unconditional. No procs, that's from bullet 1. But now if we look at the full conditional ceiling, build 1's actually going to hit for 178% weapon damage because of the Overdog's proc. Now here's my honest take, and I want to be very clear about this because I think honesty matters more than just having a generic hot take. For most striker content, Overdogs is going to be the right call. That 178% conditional damage ceiling is real, and in easier content, your heroic content where you have a consistent mix of enemy tiers, but you'll be able to pick out the lowest tier enemy often enough, Overdogs delivered. I run Overdogs on my striker AR builds often, I run it through retaliations and things like that. But here's where it gets interesting. In escalation specifically, I actually don't run Overdogs, or the Ninjabike for that matter. But in relation to the Overdogs, your target priorities change in an escalation so rapidly based on what's going on around you. Sometimes the lowest tier enemy is not the right call in that moment. You're tracking a heavy, you're dealing with a shield, or you're managing a suppressor. And every time you're not hitting the lowest tier enemy, you're sitting down at 114% weapon damage, which makes you actually losing to the Ninjabike and losing to some of the other setups that I have. If you want to check out what I run in escalations, check the description down below for the link to my last video. So the question isn't whether or not Overdogs is good, it is a question of, are the conditions going to be met consistently in the content you're running? And are you going to be looking for the higher ceiling or the guaranteed floor? You decide. So we already conceded that the Ninjabike bag probably isn't the right call on your meta striker build. But here's where it gets really interesting, because on the Core Strength Capacitor build, Ninja doesn't just compete, it actually dominates, unconditionally. So the same concept, we're going to compare 3 builds. Build 1 is going to be your Overdogs fully procced. Build 2 is your Overdogs without the proc, and then build 3 is going to be our Ninjabike build. All 3 are running the Technician spec with the Picaro's holster. So build 1, Overdogs procced with 6 red cores. I actually don't have a red Picaro's holster, but you get the idea. A tier 2 capacitor scaling. Your unconditional damage total is going to be 142.5%. With Overdogs active, that scales all the way up to 230%. That's a super huge ceiling. Build 2 with the same setup, but no proc from Overdogs, meaning that you're just hitting the wrong tier enemy at that moment. We're going to sit down at 142.5%. That's your floor when the conditions aren't met. Now in build 3, our Ninjabike build, we sit at 181.25% weapon damage unconditionally. Always up, from bullet 1, no ramp. Now I want to take this time to clarify a misconception that I've seen all too often in comments as well as other videos. And that's the idea that all red cores is better for your skills with the core strength set because of the bonus skill efficiency that you get. So let's take a look at that. When running all red, your 7 non-yellow cores get you 78.75% skill efficiency. Our build with 4 non-yellow cores gets us 45% skill efficiency. So sure, that's a real difference and it's worth acknowledging. All red wins the skill efficiency battle, if you will. But here's what that actually looks like in practice. Skill efficiency is all encompassing, but I'm going to compare skill damage and skill health numbers, as I believe those are the most relevant and higher end content. So at tier 2, your striker drone does plus 40% skill damage, factor in your 78.75% skill efficiency, and your total damage comes to 118.75%. We're going to add that same skill efficiency to our drone health, and you're at 288.75% drone health. Now let's take a look at tier 6. Your striker drone does plus 120% skill damage, plus the 45% skill efficiency, and your total drone damage is now plus 165%. Adding that same skill efficiency to your skill health, and now you're sitting at plus 465% drone health. So the tier 6 drone, even with less skill efficiency from your set, wins in damage by 46%, and it wins in health by 176%. So no, having max red pieces, even with the core strength set, is not better for your skills than having max skill tiers. It allows you to be more flexible, and it is still a good bonus, but it is not 1-for-1 better than max yellow. So here's the full picture. When Overdogs is procced, build 1 wins in weapon damage by 48.75%. And that's real, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But my Ninjabike build wins weapon damage by 38.75% when that condition isn't met. Additionally, my build's doing 46% more skill damage and has 176% more skill health. So you decide which side of the trade-off you're on. So, does Ninjabike actually nerf your build? Here's the honest answer. It probably depends on the build and the content that you're playing. On a pure striker build and standard content, Overdogs is usually the right call. That conditional ceiling is real, and the conditions are met often enough to justify it. That's how I run my striker AR. But the idea that Ninjabike is always bad, that it always nerfs your build, that's the myth. Because on the core strength capacitor setup, the Ninja doesn't nerf anything, and if anything, the argument says that it makes it stronger by a landslide. The community formed an opinion when Ninjabike launched, and the comparisons were simpler. With the new sets, new brands, and power creep, the math has changed some, while the opinions haven't. Build crafting is about understanding what your pieces actually give you, not repeating what someone said in a comment 3 seasons ago. And look, if you're running group content with a full squad and you're splitting aggro, then sure, lean into max DPS. Stack those conditionals and chase that ceiling. Let your teammates eat some of the bullets while you cook, right? That's what group play is for. But in solo play, when all eyes are on you, you may end up needing some tools to sustain yourself. And even in group content, I'm sure you've all seen it. The god tier max roll striker DPS player with the perfect build and god rolls, full stacks, spending half the run face down on the ground because they can't take any damage. Little known fact, you don't actually build striker stacks and put out DPS when you're dead. As always, if this video helped you, do me a favor, like, subscribe, or leave me a comment. It goes a long way in helping me bring you more of the stuff that actually matters, because remember, when you're built different, you hit different. Thanks again.